The sun blazed over the lake as Karen stormed toward me, her heels stabbing into the grass as though she owned every inch beneath her feet. Waving a clipboard like a weapon, she shouted that I was trespassing and ordered me to pack up my things. I leaned back in my chair, took a slow sip from my drink, and smiled. Behind me, her precious boat gleamed at the dock, polished like a trophy. She thought she had the upper hand until her eyes landed on the massive red letters slapped across the hull, repo. Her jaw dropped, her face turned crimson, and she screamed that no one could touch her property. I didn't move. I simply met her glare and reminded her that those were the same words she had thrown at me only an hour ago. She spun toward the dock worker, demanding he untie her boat, but he ignored her as if she were invisible. Shaking her clipboard so hard that papers scattered into the wind, she barked that this was an official HOA eviction notice. I chuckled, set down my drink, and pulled out my phone. Calmly, I explained that the county clerk didn't even recognize her so-called HOA. Before she could spit another word, my screen lit up with a video call from my brother, his sheriff's badge shining clear on camera. His voice boomed through the speaker, ordering her to step away from the dock. For the first time, Karen froze. She tried to laugh it off, calling it a staged trick, but the sound of a patrol boat rolling across the water silenced her. Red and blue lights flashed against the waves as deputies stepped ashore. When one of them flipped through her eviction notice, his brows furrowed. The papers weren't legal. They were forged. His words struck her like a slap. Forgery was a felony. Karen's legs wavered, but her pride pushed her to dial for backup. She screamed into her phone that she was the HOA president and demanded immediate assistance, but when her call went on speaker, everyone heard the officer on the other end remind her that multiple complaints had already been filed against her that week. Karen's mask cracked. She turned her finger toward me, accusing me of squatting, but I calmly handed the deputy my laminated deed. County records proved the land and dock were mine. The truth hit her harder than any insult. Still, she rushed to the yacht, clawing at the ropes like a desperate woman clinging to her last scrap of power. The deputies let her try, smiling faintly, until the repo agent stepped forward with his clipboard and told her plainly that the vessel had been seized for 12 missed payments. It was no longer hers. Her shriek echoed over the water as the crew fired up the engine and guided the boat away, leaving Karen flailing against reality. The deputy caught her by the arm before she stumbled into the lake. Her voice cracked with venom, insisting she ruled the neighborhood. I stepped close, lowering my voice so only she could hear, and told her the truth. She used to rule, but that reign ended today. Around us, neighbors who had been victims of her bullying now recorded every moment, some laughing, others cheering. Her humiliation spread through the crowd like wildfire, and when the deputy called dispatch, his words about forged legal documents seemed to drain the last of her strength. She went limp, eyes darting wildly, but the cuffs closed around her wrists all the same. As the patrol car carried her away, her yacht shrinking into it, on the horizon, the lakefront shifted. Neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid her wrath stepped closer. An older man thanked me for saving the The sun was blazing on the lake when Karen stormed toward me, heels stabbing the grass like she owned the ground under my feet. She waved a clipboard and shouted, "Pack your junk. You're trespassing on HOA property." I leaned back in my chair, took a long sip from my drink, and smiled. Behind me, her precious boat was docked, shining like her favorite trophy. She thought she had the upper hand until she saw the massive red letters plastered on the side repo. Her jaw dropped. Her face turned red and she screamed, "You can't touch that. That's my property." I didn't move. I just looked her dead in the eyes and said, "Funny, that's exactly what you said to me an hour ago." Karen's voice cracked as she called out to the dock worker. "Untie my boat right now." But the man ignored her, keeping the ropes tight as if she was invisible. She turned back to me, shaking the clipboard so hard the papers flew out into the wind. "This is an official HOA eviction notice," she barked, pointing at my chair like it was a crime scene. I chuckled, set my can down, and pulled out my phone. "Official?" I said calmly. "That's funny because I just got off the phone with the county clerk. They don't even recognize your HOA." Her lips quivered and before she could shout again, my screen lit up with a video call. On the other end was my brother, wearing his sheriff's badge, clear as day. His voice boomed through the speaker. "Ma'am, step away from the dock. You're interfering with private property." Karen froze, blinking fast, and for the first time, she didn't have a comeback. Karen's fake confidence cracked like glass. She tried to laugh it off, waving her hands in the air. "Oh, come on. You can't fool me with some staged video call," she snapped. But before she could finish, a patrol boat cruised into view from the other side of the lake. Red and blue lights flashing across the water. The deputies stepped out, their radios buzzing. Karen spun around, panic flooding her face. "Wait, no. This is a misunderstanding. He's the one breaking the law," she yelled, pointing at me like a desperate child caught lying. One deputy walked right past me and went straight to her clipboard, flipping through the so-called eviction notice. His eyebrows shot up. "Ma'am, this isn't legal. These aren't county documents. Did you forge this?" Her voice trembled as she stammered. It's a template we use in the HOA." The deputy held it up to the light, then looked at her sharply. "Forgery is a felony." Karen's legs buckled, and for the first time all day, she went completely silent. The silence didn't last long. Karen's phone buzzed in her hand, and she snatched it up like a lifeline. "Yes, officer, this is the HOA president. I demand backup immediately," she shouted into the speaker. But the call went on speaker by mistake, and everyone heard the voice on the other end. "Ma'am, we've already had 3 complaints filed against you this week. Stop calling this line for personal disputes." The deputy beside her smirked and crossed his arms. While I leaned back and folded my hands behind my head, Karen's face drained of color, but she still tried one last card. She pointed at my dock and hissed. "This isn't even his property. He's squatting here." I reached into my folder and calmly pulled out a laminated document, sliding it into the deputy's hands. He scanned it quickly. Then looked up at Karen. "This dock and the land it's on belong to him. County records are crystal clear." Karen staggered back as though the ground had shifted beneath her. Whispering, "That can't be true." I took a slow sip of my drink and muttered just loud enough for her to hear. Funny thing about lies, they drown fast when the truth comes floating in. Karen's knees wobbled, but her anger flared again. She rushed toward the yacht, clutching the railing as if holding on to her last shred of power. "This boat is mine," she shrieked, trying to untie the ropes with shaky hands. The dock worker stepped forward to stop her, but the deputy raised a hand. "Let her try," he said with a faint smile. Everyone watched as Karen tugged and pulled, but the knot wouldn't give. Then the repo agent walked up, clipboard in hand, and said firmly, "Ma'am, this vessel was seized this morning. You missed 12 months of payments. It's not yours anymore." Her eyes went wide, and for a second, she just froze in disbelief. Then, in pure desperation, she snapped. "You can't take it. I'll sue all of you." I stood up slowly, walked to the edge of the dock, and looked her dead in the eye. "Karen, you tried to evict me from my own dock. But now you're the one getting thrown out of the water." The crowd that had gathered nearby broke into quiet laughter, and Karen's face burned as red as the repo sign glaring back at her. Karen's scream echoed across the lake as the repo agent signaled the crew. In one swift move, they fired up the yacht's engine and began steering it away from the dock. Karen stumbled, clutching at the ropes like a drowning woman. But the deputy caught her by the arm before she could fall in. "That's enough, ma'am," he said firmly. She thrashed against his grip, spitting words like venom. "You can't humiliate me like this. I run this neighborhood." I stepped closer, lowering my voice so only she could hear. "No, Karen, you ran it. Today, you lost everything you used to scare people." Her eyes flicked toward the crowd that had gathered, neighbors she'd bullied for years. Some held up their phones, recording every second. Whispers turned into chuckles and chuckles into open laughter. Karen's face twisted with rage, but the humiliation hit harder than any handcuffs. The deputy finally pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, we've got a woman here interfering with a lawful repossession and presenting forged legal documents advice." Karen froze mid-struggle. The words forged legal documents seemed to echo in her ears. For the first time, she didn't fight back. Instead, she went limp in the deputy's hands, eyes darting around like a cornered animal. The radio crackled back. "Bring her in." The deputy nodded and slipped the cuffs over Karen's wrists. She let out a broken laugh, trying to save face in front of the cameras. "This is all a mistake. You'll see. I'll be back in charge tomorrow." But no one believed her anymore. The crowd wasn't silent now. They were cheering. Neighbors clapped, whistled, and some even shouted, "About time." Phone stayed raised, capturing every second of her downfall. Karen twisted toward me as they led her up the dock. Her voice cracked as she spat her last threat. "This isn't over. You'll regret crossing me." I didn't move. I just looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Karen, I fought for this land, and I don't regret a thing." The repo boat drifted farther into the lake, her precious yacht nothing more than a shrinking on the horizon. The deputy glanced back at me, a small grin on his face. "You did good standing your ground," he said. I nodded, but inside I felt something deeper, a quiet satisfaction that justice had finally caught up to the woman who thought she could rewrite the law with a clipboard. For the first time in years, the dock was mine. Truly mine. As Karen was driven away in the back of the patrol car. The lakefront turned almost silent, broken only by the soft hum of the repo boat disappearing into the distance. The neighbors who had once avoided me began stepping closer, their faces no longer fearful. An older man raised his hand and said, "You saved us all a lot of misery today." A woman holding her little boy whispered, "She threatened to take our house last month. Thank you for standing up to her." Their voices carried something Karen never had. Respect. I stood tall but calm, glancing back at the empty space where her yacht once sat. "She thought power came from rules she invented," I said slowly. "But real power is in truth and in protecting what's ours." The crowd nodded, some wiping tears, others clapping softly. One of the deputies walked up, lowering his voice. "She'll be facing charges for forgery and harassment. With the footage everyone recorded today, there's no escaping it." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The dock lights flickered on as the sun dipped below the horizon. The water glowing golden red. For the first time in a long while, the lake felt peaceful. Free from the shadow of Karen's control. And as I sat back down in my chair, drink in hand, I whispered to myself. I didn't fight for this country to be told I can't sit on my own dock. The night settled over the lake, calm and steady. But my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Dozens of messages poured in, neighbors sharing clips. Local news outlets already asking for statements. It was spreading faster than I could read. One headline already lit up my screen. HOA president arrested after forged eviction notice backfires. I shook my head with a half smile. Karen always wanted the spotlight. Now she had it. Just not the way she planned. As I scrolled, a message from my brother, the sheriff, popped up. "Good work holding steady. Proud of you. She won't be bothering anyone for a long time." That hit deeper than I expected. I looked out over the dock, my dock, the reflection of the moon rippling across the water. Behind me, the same neighbors who once crossed the street to avoid Karen's wrath now stood together.